Gee, I wonder how the Bizarro community is doing. Look, it's an update from Bizarrocon. Let's see what this says. I wonder what's going on with Bizarrocon. Bizarrocon update. We did not meet our registration goals last week, and I have decided to cancel November's Bizarrocon. Well, that ain't good. Hey, everybody, Kevin Strange here with another Bizarro Fiction update. Before we get any deeper into this, I want to direct everyone's attention over here to the Indiegogo we're running from through April 17th. Um, my first ever comic book, an adaptation of my 2007 Trauma Dance official selection and cult classic zombie comedy Dead Shit, has been adapted into a graphic novel, a 3-issue limited series. And it's the first issue is live on Indiegogo right now. It's 32 full color pages of mutant zombies and Nixon and Hogan, my hack movie stoner characters, being just as dumb and uh, uh, silly and ridiculous as ever. In this expanded version of the Dead Shit movie. Dead Shit is a short film. This is not a whole lot that happens in the Dead Shit movie, but it launched the Strangeville universe, and we went on to have many more wonderful Nixon and Hogan adventures. I've now gone back to the basics, as it were, the roots of Strangeville, and I've brought Dead Shit back from the grave, if you will, and reimagined it as a graphic novel. And the new version of the story is much bigger, much larger. It's almost as if this is the feature film version, the full length version of what Dead Shit could have been back in the day, reimagined as a comic book. We have all kinds of perks here. My favorite being the Dead Shit combo package, comic book and DVD, so you can watch the movie while you read the comic book. That's only a $15 buy-in there. You can get the digital version for only $2, or you can get the print version for only $8. And we have a bunch more different tiers. You can check all this out at Indiegogo.com. You can search for Dead Shit the comic book, or you can go to KevinTheStrange.com and find out all the details and the linkages there. Let's get back into Bizarrocon. So, you guys might wonder why I rag on Bizarro Fiction so often. Like, what do I care? I'm over here making a comic book, has nothing to do with Bizarro Fiction. What in the world do I just keep hammering on this genre of fiction for? Well, the answer is twofold. Number one is I love it, the genre. When I discovered Bizarro Fiction in around late 2011, it was this magical door that opened where I felt as though I had said what I needed to say in my indie film career, and I felt like fiction was the next logical step to bring my vision, my expanding universe of weirdness, and I found an entire genre dedicated to sort of the literary version of these weird types of storytelling, like these weird cult stories, like Trauma and John Waters, and these types of really weird, irreverent counterculture storytelling adventures. And I fell in love with the genre, and as an indie filmmaker that had, traveled coast to coast, screened my films at film festivals and conventions, signed hundreds, if not thousands, of autographs, taken pictures with fans, I could have simply created fiction and in my own lane. I had built my own sort of brand as Kevin Strange and Hack Movies and Strangeville, and I could have stayed right in that path and been a loner, as it were. But I felt this pull towards some sort of a community of creators, of artists, and I wanted to be a part of something bigger. I wanted to share my creative weirdness with something bigger. And when I found Bizarro Fiction, I said, this is the thing. I can get involved in this. I can add my weirdness to it and also help the direction of this fledgling community. Bizarro had only been really big in a counterculture sense since about 2009. So it was still brand new as far as, they'll tell you, the purists will tell you, Bizarro's been around since 2001 or 1999. And while there may have been four friends, trading zines in 1999, it wasn't until 2009 that the sort of larger counterculture took notice, and the fan base, sort of fans of Bizarro Fiction, emerged. And so only a couple of years later, when I found it, I felt as though it could use sort of veteran hand. I'd been creating weird trauma-esque art since about 2003, and I felt like by 2009, and I had created and sold so much merch and so many DVDs. I had done so many lectures on the convention circuit and done so many film festival appearances that I felt like I could add sort of a veteran voice to Bizarro Fiction. And I didn't ask permission. I just sort of smashed onto the scene with Strange House Books, and I gathered together a small group of who I believed at the time were like-minded people, most of which turned out to be opportunists who wanted to use my wisdom and knowledge gained from years of the indie grind for their own I don't even want to say advancing their careers, because their careers went nowhere, but for their own egos. They sort of wanted the spotlight. They wanted to say, I'm the guy, I'm the star. And a few of those guys did that for a couple of years and then burnt out and basically disappeared and aren't even a part of the genre anymore. And here I am. It's 2019. It's been almost 10 years, and I'm still talking about Bizarro Fiction. The reason I am is because I really felt like I should have taken a more central leadership role in the genre to help steer it out of the skid that it found itself in several years later, in around 2000, late 2012, somewhere between 2012 and 2014 is when the far left socialist, fringe, progressive social justice movement really got its hooks into Bizarro Fiction and started to drag it to the point that we are at today with the cancellation of Bizarrocon. And I felt a responsibility back then to take on that leadership role and to help try to steer us out of the skid and keep us from falling off that precipice into the inevitable end of every progressivism can't create things. It can only destroy existing structures, and I didn't want to see Bizarro Fiction destroyed. I wanted to see it thrive and prosper and grow in new and interesting ways. And all I saw happening, like I said, somewhere between 2012 and 2014 was the same inevitable, nosedive off a cliff that happened when the progressive movement, the social justice movement infiltrated video game culture, and when the social justice movement infiltrated the science fiction and fantasy fiction movement genre. And anywhere that progressivism touches, there's they only have one playbook. They only have one move set, and they have the power of social shaming. They've learned through Sal Alinsky's Rules for Radicals and several other prominent socialist works that manipulate public perception. They have one playbook, and they sort of use this. They use this tool or technique to find any community and divide it by power, divide it by the perception of power. This group, they divide it into identities. They divide it into social identities, often racial or gender-based identities. And they say the white men have the power, regardless of what the facts and statistics actually show. They'll say the white men have the power, and the women, the minorities, and the gays don't have the power. And now we need to use a bureaucratic structure to forcefully and artificially manipulate that power out of the hands of the white males into the hands of the minorities, women, and gays. And the 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 insidiousness that emerges from that, the ability to call anyone who disagrees with the direction that these people who have not, just because a person is a woman or gay or a minority doesn't mean that they have the wisdom, um, or the talent, or the leadership skills to take on that power. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying white males intrinsically have power. I'm saying that in an altruistic world, the person most gifted with leadership abilities leads. The most talented writers would have that sort of prestige and clout at the top of the food chain because of their talent, because of their ability to connect with the fan base, the ability even to sell books, which I know in a socialism, a socialist controlled, counterculture, it's taboo to even discuss sales. But the fact of the matter is writers want to make money at writing. They would like to be able to do it as a full-time job, every single one of them, and they don't talk about it because they are conditioned by socialism to sort of disparage capitalism around and profit making money around every turn. But what ends up happening is those people that take power, whether they deserve that power or whether they have the ability to lead in a productive manner, they are then able to scream racist, bigot, Nazi, homophobe at anyone who disagrees with the direction that they take any particular community. And so using these tools of social justice, they then, as I said, progressivism, social justice, they only destroy structures. So as is what happened in video games, as is what is happening currently in mainstream comic books, and is what happened in the science fiction fantasy genres, and is what is also happening in small press horror. Basically, anywhere there's an online community, there is a small contingent of progressives who will infiltrate that community and then tear it apart from the inside, destroy it, and then move on to the next target. Because progressives, they are a religious movement that gets off on sacrifice. They're a virtual human sacrifice cult, and their goal is never to elevate Bizarro fiction. It's never to elevate science fiction and fantasy. It's never to elevate comic books. It is to grab at power and then use that power to socially shame, ostracize, and unperson as many people as possible. And in the digital world, your sort of digital social personality is what they sacrifice. They kill that, they murder that, and they use that energy to bask in their self-righteousness and then move on to, but that's only temporary. As fast as the internet moves, there's always a new sacrificial victim to find. And so the progressive movement has torn through Bizarro fiction for the last 5 or 6 years. It has sacrificed many of the most talented writers and leaders in its ranks, and has left it to the point that today Bizarrocon itself has been canceled. And I believe this would have been I believe, the 12th annual Bizarrocon. So it only takes a few years to go from an annual event gathering that can be counted on every year to the point where not even 25 people are willing to pony up the registration fee to rent the venue to even hold the event. And I've warned of this for years, and I've been called a Nazi, and I've been called a racist, and I've been called a homophobe and a bigot. All of the different emotional, all of the emotional blackmail that progressives have in their arsenal have been flung at me, trying to shut me up and silence me and shame me, and more specifically, to warn others against having the opinions, voicing publicly the opinions that I hold. Um, if they can humiliate me and ostracize me and virtually sacrifice me to the gods of social justice, then that will prevent a a mutiny of the relatively normal center base of writers and readers, because the majority of the people in any of these communities are just at the center. They don't care about politics. They don't care about identity. They are egalitarians at heart, because egalitarianism is, I believe, intrinsic to human nature. We want to natural leaders want to lead, and natural followers want a leader that will guide them to prosperity. And they don't care what that person looks like. They don't care what gender that person is. They don't care what age that person is. They care about the results, the tangible results that a leader can produce. And the same thing holds true for a creative community. The creative community looks towards the most talented among them for inspiration and for guidance for how to become great along with them. And they don't care what that person looks like. They don't care what sex that person is. They simply follow the best. And so the progressives that infiltrate these movements, like Bizarro Fiction, they have to constantly sacrifice victims. They have to constantly provide cautionary tales in order to scare that center base into complacency, into compliance, into silence, into fear of being the next victim dragged to the altar to be sacrificed and used as a fear object. So I want to point out just a couple of things, and then I'll get out of here. That rant pretty much sums up my adventures in Bizarro Fiction. I couldn't prevent the progressives from dragging this off the cliff, and maybe had I tried harder, I would have been able to do so. But I'm only human, and my own ego could only take so many people that I considered close friends turning their backs on me and out of fear. I could only take so many insults from writers that I respected, that I think are extremely talented. I can only take so many of them telling me that the only reason that I have these opinions about progressives and social justice is because I'm a talentless hack and a failure and jealous. There's only so many times I could hear that before my own resentment and anger got the best of me, and I decided to just let go and let Bizarro fling itself off the cliff. And that's a fault of my own personality. That's a flaw of my own. Had I been a stronger person, I would have been able to let all of those insults deflect right off of me, because I know that they're done out of fear, and I know that they're done out of they are perpetuated from those progressives in power who don't have the genre's interest in best mind, the genre's best interest in mind, who always saw me as a threat because of my wisdom and experience in indie promotion, and my talent as a writer. They always saw that as a threat, that I might use those skills in a more powerful leadership role to bring Bizarro to higher heights. And I've said publicly for years that I want Bizarro writers to be able to brand themselves Bizarro and make a living off of Bizarro Fiction. and the progressives have never pushed for that. They've never seen Bizarro as a conduit towards success. It's always been seen as a fringe hipster movement that only a few people are ever supposed to hear about. They want to be able to sit in Portland and drink their craft home brewed, beers and talk about how elite they are because there's only several of them. And you probably never heard of Bizarro Fiction. That's sort of what they want to lead every conversation with, to make themselves seem more cultured and more enlightened than whoever they're whatever normie they're talking to at the time. Whereas I always wanted to bring Bizarro to more of a mainstream culture in order for the writers of Bizarro Fiction to be able to find financial and career success. We all deserve that. Writers work hard. Writers spend long hours, thankless hours, crafting these weird tales, and there's no reason that those should go out to the 23 people who registered for Bizarrocon. More like 23,000 or 23 million is the type of audience that I want to see Bizarro Fiction have. And again, my own flaws in personality eventually made me abandon that effort and made me really resent Bizarro itself, which is not right, because Bizarro hasn't done anything. Bizarro was just infiltrated by progressives. And it's if I have ire and hatred and resentment, and I have to direct it outwardly, those are the people who deserve it, not the genre itself. But I chose to abandon the genre itself, and I do feel bad for that. So we're going to go over this just a little bit. I'm going to talk about where it went wrong here at the at the 11th hour, and how Bizarro sort of threw itself off the cliff. And I just want to show you guys how no matter how much you beg progressives, no matter how much you virtue signal to progressives, they don't care, because they don't. At the end of the day, they don't believe in their own ideology. Their ideology is a shield for their power. And I'm going to present that to you right now. So let's read this. Bizarrocon update. We did not meet our registration goals last week, and I've decided to cancel November's Bizarrocon. Instead, we will take a break and focus on improving our infrastructure so we can come back better and stronger next year. That will likely never happen. That's my own editorial in there. Thank you to the 23 people who registered early. I will issue refunds via PayPal this week. So they couldn't even muster up, after all of the begging, postulating, after all of the pleas to women and feminists and male to female trans people. After all of the pleading, we're gonna change. We're gonna make this specifically. We're gonna fashion this event specifically around the couple of you that come to the show every year, and the main financiers of this show be damned. They will get in line, and they will no toe to whatever demands you make, so that you several feminists and male to female trans people will continue to come to our show. Just please listen. We're going to create an inclusivity and diversity board. We're going to enroll in training. We're going to this and we're going to that. All came down to 23 people. 23 people who put their money up to reserve the venue and failed to do so. So continuing. I will miss all of you in November, but ultimately I think this is what's best. There will be other events we can meet up at this year, and I encourage anyone who can to join us at Bizarrocon Barcelona in July, whatever that is. Let's hope more than 23 people go to Bizarrocon Barcelona, but my guess is that ain't happening. So I just want to, let's go over here to, remember this, the open letter to Bizarro Fiction. I read this in a previous Bizarro video. I broke down all the different, pleads and concessions and firings and book banning that took place in order to appease this tiny minority of feminist women and male to female trans people who were upset with Bizarrocon. I just want to come down here and go and highlight this list of like this. This was one of the weirder parts of this open letter from the head editor of Eraserhead Press and the woman who runs Bizarrocon. She has a list of like 50 women's names here, like specifically points out. It was like she made a list of every woman who has ever participated in Bizarro in any way, shape, or form, and sort of virtue signaled to them like women, 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 women. It's all about this is a very imagine if again you attend an event that's like half it's like two-thirds it's like two-thirds women and a third men, and yet the promoter of the event went out of their way to only thank the one-third of men and completely ignore the two-thirds of women who went to the show. You would say, well, that's rather sexist. Why did this event organizer specifically point out just men? Well, this here is an attempt to call out these women who make up at best a third of the attendees of Bizarrocon every year, and completely ignore like this woman is obsessed with gender. She's obsessed with this gender competition. It's extremely sexist and offensive to the majority of the people who support her publishing house and attend her event. When I read this, I'm a Bizarrocon attendee. I'm a Bizarro fiction writer. I'm a Wonderland Award nominee. My name's not on this fucking list. Not only is my name not on the list, but no one with a dick is on this list. Actually, I take that back. There's a couple, because there's the male to female trans people are included here, because she would be remiss if she didn't talk about the men who identify as women, but not the men who identify as men. And then for some reason, there's like zero women who identify as men, because in these progressive cultures, they tell you in social justice, they tell you if you're a female and you decide to become female to male trans, you gain what they call male privilege. And that's actually like 1984 Newspeak, the George Orwell novel 1984. War is peace, up is down, left is right, good is bad, death is life. Privilege, the word privilege, when you say male privilege, it's actually in the progressive community. That is actually something that is a social detriment. It will actually force you to the back of the line. Your quote unquote privilege will force you to the back of the line. Your voice will be the least heard. You will be the least likely to be recognized for your accomplishments. And so there are very few female to male trans that participate in these hardcore leftist progressive social justice communities. It is male to female, because a male to female trans person will they then shed and abandon their male privilege and are then embraced by the culture. And what ends up happening, if this is allowed to go on long enough, what's really bizarre, if you watch these social justice movements, if you watch what happens in, if you follow like the entire saga of what happened in video games, of what happened in science fiction and fantasy, of what will eventually happen in mainstream comics, and what will eventually happen in Bizarro, should Bizarro live long enough to see it, is eventually these feminist women will resent the male to female trans people, because fundamentally they'll claim that they're men. They'll say, well, you still have a penis. You're still male. You're male identifying as female, but you have more privilege than us because you're biologically male. And so again, that privilege, that term, privilege, is used in the opposite sense, whereas they should feel ashamed of their maleness, even though they've abandoned that as an identity. Biologically, that's still what they are. And so hardcore feminists will eventually turn on the male to female trans people, and it will become this giant war between feminists and male to female trans, when that's all that's left, because eventually everyone with any common sense will abandon one of these social justice communities, one of these progressive communities, until it is only those hardcore believers, the most devout religious among them, which turn out to be always the feminists and the male to female trans people. And so then it ends up being a war, and once they start fighting, the entire community dissolves. That's sort of the end of any. When I say that progressivism always can't create, it can only destroy existing structures, the eventual end is always the fight between feminists and male to female trans people. It's interesting. It's very interesting from a sociological perspective to watch all this type of stuff happen over and over again exactly the same way. And so I wanted to point out here this big glob of women's names, and then go back, and then I wanted to go over here and highlight the we're now on the Bizarrocon registration page for this year's Bizarrocon. These are the 23 people. If you look at this list versus this list, very few of these women that were virtue signaled to actually appear on the list of people who ponied up the registration fee to rent the venue. In fact, the vast majority of the people on this list are men. These people's names, the core group of Bizarro writers who pay for the venue to be held every year, appear nowhere on this list, save for just a couple. There's a couple in here. Nowhere in this open letter to Bizarro Fiction do the names of the writers who fundamentally support financially the community appear. Instead, this is a wildly sexist list of women who have turned their back entirely on Bizarro Fiction because it's not woke enough, because it's not progressive enough, because there's not enough social justice. And that's where we end. That's the end of Bizarro Fiction, in my opinion. Once there's no Bizarrocon, that means, and we've already in this open letter, we've already seen that the Bizarro Writers Association has been dissolved and encouraged to, it's been encouraged to pop up elsewhere, being, led by writers. That means that the Wonderland Award for Excellence in Bizarro Fiction is fundamentally, here's where she says she encourages the formation of a new BWA to be run by writers. The fact of the matter is that BWA first has to exist, then has to organize the Wonderland Awards annually, and then has to have a convention at which to present that award. So at this point, with no Bizarrocon, with no Bizarro Writers Association, and no Wonderland Award, as far as I can tell, for 2019, what is Bizarro Fiction? What fundamentally is Bizarro Fiction? At this point, Bizarro Fiction, without any of this structure, the structure has now been destroyed by progressivism, wokeness, social justice. Bizarro has been relegated to a couple of Facebook groups that are rarely updated. Friends, this is as close to the end as I've ever seen a subculture get. This is worse than anything that happened in video games. This is worse than anything that happened in science fiction and fantasy. It means the Hugo Awards are still going. There was a huge fight for years over the validity of the voting and the nomination process for the Hugo Awards, because progressives came in there, tore it out, and basically said white males no longer deserve this award because you won too many in a row. This is worse than that. There's still a Hugo Award. there's no more Wonderland Award unless somebody, unless there's somebody patches this together with glue and tape, and whoever does is then going to get attacked by all these feminists and male to female trans people, because it's never enough. It's never good enough. No good deed ever goes unpunished. Whatever group comes together to piece together the Wonderland Award will be attacked socially, will be ostracized, and will have their reputations destroyed if every single name on that list isn't female. And that's sad. It's a sad day, and every time I do one of these videos, I try to really explain the scope. Take it back to the beginning, take it back to the fundamental reason why we're all part of this weird little genre of fiction. I try to talk about where it all went wrong, where we could have, fixed it. I called in the last video I called 2 years ago. I called for a reformation of the Bizarro Writers Association to save the Wonderland Award, maybe to save Bizarrocon, maybe to save the genre of fiction. I wrote many articles on my website. How to save Bizarro Fiction. What's wrong with Bizarro Fiction? 5 ways to fix Bizarro Fiction. How to save the BWA. I vocalized my ideas from a leadership position for how to fix and save and keep us and get us to a point where we're prospering, let alone surviving. Bizarro's drowning in the lake, and I'm not just trying to keep it above water. I'm trying to get it onto the shore. I'm trying to build it a house. I'm trying to provide it shelter. Let alone, at this point, we're just trying to keep its head above water so it doesn't drown. And it's drowning, folks. It's drowning. I don't know if there's any saving it at this point. That's about all I have to say about Bizarrocon cancellation 2019. No more Bizarrocon. They'll be back though, bigger and stronger somehow. These 23 people are gonna make it bigger and stronger. Go to Barcelona, see what that's all about. Hope that's a huge success. And remember, you got till April 17th to jump in on this Dead Shit the comic book. Did you see the I've got some art here. There's the cover. I'm the illustrator, by the way, written and illustrated by Kevin Strange. That's pretty hard. I know it's kind of crappy art, but it's meant to be. It's a cruddy world. Strangeville is a cruddy town, cruddy art, cruddy movies, cruddy fiction. I've got some of my panels here, some of my pages. It's pretty cool. Not bad for a non-artist, I should say. Pretty cool. Anyway, that's about it. Please back Dead Shit the comic book today. Get us over we're almost there, 60% funded. We only have a little $500 goal. I'm going to put a bunch of cool stretch goals in too, if we can get past 500. If we start to get towards 1,000, I'm going to put a bunch of, every backer will get a bunch of, like every time we say we get to 750, I'll announce something, and then say 900, and then once we get past 1,000 or 1,200, and everybody will get little add-ons. So if you only ordered a comic book, like a physical comic book to be mailed to you, every time we hit one of these new stretch goals, you get a little something cooler thrown into the pile, and so you'll get more than just a comic book if we can get past our goal. So that's about that, gang. Talk to you next time. Figure out how to stop this. There it is.